Well, hi everyone. This is Kenton and Rafa. This is our new podcast, which we're starting. It's called Locked on Nordren, and it's mostly about nerdy stuff that we'll be talking about here. But we will focus mostly on Soulsborne content. With the imminent release of Elden Ring, there are a lot of hot takes on the internet about prior From Software games, but we want to give a more not a hot take, but just a more honest take that doesn't overly criticize or mellow out the flaws or the good things regarding the game. So, how's it going, Kenton?
Not too shabby.
So, we've been playing a lot of Dark Souls 3 lately. How's that jolly cooperation feeling?
Well, I really haven't played the game by myself. We've had so much jolly cooperation flying around. You gotta keep your head down.
So, here's what's up. We're going to be doing both a rating and a ranking of the games in the topics of graphics, sound, gameplay, and overall. And I'm going to be giving you some of my personal comments regarding what I felt when I first played or specific moments during my time with the games, which have been a lot. I will tell you outright, I've spent hundreds of hours in each of these games, especially Bloodborne and Dark Souls 3. Now, I'm by no means an expert or a speedrunner or a guy who has discovered all of the secrets or of the lore or the games, but I have played them extensively and I've done a lot of research into the lore and game mechanics, so I kind of know what I'm talking about. So, anything you want to add before we start on, Kenton?
Let's get jump straight into the Demon Souls series then.
Okay, the Demon Souls game, which was the first Soulsborne game. It was the pioneer of an entire subgenre of game called Souls-likes. So Demon Souls, graphically, it was pretty cool. It had a pretty distinct look, but it wasn't anything groundbreaking. I always thought that for a game looking for that realism, it looked kind of, let's call it cartoonish maybe, because the your player character when in soul form was so bright, and we've seen other games attain the kind of graphical fidelity that From Software was looking for. However, the
Um,
remake, yes, Kenton.
I was gonna say there's I think the realism they weren't really actually going for it when you look at a lot of the monsters and stuff they were creating, and even the player character himself really is kind of ghoulish and in pretty much every game you play. Uh, just calling it they were going for some kind of graphical height for graphical fidelity is kind of a little a bridge too far, I think. But definitely the graphics were at that time they weren't terribly groundbreaking.
I will tell you though that the remake is a thing of beauty. The remake is essentially graphically perfect. So I'm gonna give Demon Souls a 7.5, and as far as graphics go, but the remake 10 out of 10.
100%.
And regarding the sound, this is going to be a recurring theme when we talk about the Soulsborne games, and it's that most of the actual soundtrack is hidden behind the boss monster wall. What I call the boss monster wall is that essentially the OST is for the bosses. Now I'll tell you one thing. Demon Souls started with a lot of memorable boss fight music. The first boss, Phalanx, has an amazing theme that is pretty iconic, and I like it. I'll listen to it on YouTube every so often to this day. So, also the sounds of swords clanging and arrows shooting and the magic, it's all pretty good. So I'm gonna give it an 8.5 out of 10. Got anything to say about that, Kenton, or do you think that's pretty accurate?
I think it's pretty accurate. I want to preface this by saying I never played Demon Souls, Dark Souls 2. I only got on toward the later end when the arguably the soundtrack got a little bit better. Um, boss wise. But yeah, it makes sense that they would put most of the soundtrack behind the during the boss fights, so they can kind of set the tone when you're fighting it, when you're going in. It kind of helps build up the boss to like the kind of vibe that they're going for. If it's like I don't know,
And
like a magical boss or like some kind of like really hard like physically physical damage boss or something like that. It makes sense to lock that stuff behind the boss wall, as you said.
I will tell you one thing. It also makes sense to not have a soundtrack blaring in the background while you play, because a lot of stuff in this game relies on sound, detecting enemies, incoming attacks, explosions, and things in the environment rely on you being able to hear them. So
That
only
could have been
enemies.
an extra level of difficulty they could have tacked on to some levels.
This game is plenty hard enough, Kenton. Don't worry about that. And now we're talking about difficulty. That's going to take us um, to the story and lore. If you're talking about it being difficult, deciphering the stories in the Souls game is pretty difficult because, and this is a system introduced by Demon Souls, but to a later extent, the lore of the game is hidden mostly behind item descriptions and interactions in certain events that you're not certain to see in initial playthroughs. See, um, Demon Souls, however, has the beauty of having a pretty straightforward story. You get to this kingdom, the kingdom of Volataria, which has been afflicted with a curse brought on by the waking of a great one, and you have to kill a bunch of demons and bring the great one back to its slumber. So you have a clear sense of what happened, what is happening, and what's going to happen. It's pretty nice, and I'm going to give it an 8 out of 10. I like the story.
Always something with these demons, right?
Yes, there's always something with these demons.
Just as the namesake would suggest.
Indeed. And that takes us to the meat and potatoes of these games, which is the gameplay loop. Demon
Now,
Souls.
I went through your little storyboard at the beginning, and you mentioned a gameplay loop quite a bit. Could you kind of define what a gameplay loop is for those that are unintroduced to this kind of stuff?
Essentially, gameplay loop is the gameplay itself, like how how you play the game, what you do in the game, how you continue to do things in the game. And loop is even more appropriate to the Soul series because you're essentially going to be looping through the game in New Games Plus. But gameplay loop is just what you do throughout the game to progress in the game. Some games have very defined gameplay loops, like the Soulsborne series, but some games have a less defined gameplay loop because they essentially mix multiple times of gameplay. And that's what the definition of gameplay loop itself entails. Like, what is the definition of the gameplay in itself? The simpler the simpler the gameplay loop, but just because it's simple doesn't mean it doesn't have to be satisfying. And
Okay, interesting.
the gameplay the gameplay loop introduced by the Soul series is essentially, die a lot so you can make it a little further. In this game, it's hard but fair. Even though Demon Souls has the problem that it's a bit more janky, and also a lot of people weren't introduced to the way the system works, mainly because of the stamina system. However, the boss design in this game is very good. It's very clear what works and what doesn't work. You're going to find yourself being comfortable with a certain type of weapon, or maybe using magic, which by the way is busted in this game, and it's a recurring theme with a lot of the Souls games. But in general, the boss design, how fun it is to explore once you get the hang of the actual game and you don't die so much, it's very good. Also, there are so many variables like the weapon you choose, the attribute leveling system, because you could have a guy that is mostly based on strength, so he's going to use strength weapons. Mostly based on dexterity, so he's going to use dexterity weapons, or mostly based on magic. At this point, faith was more of a, let's call it, support stat. Unlike, for example, Dark Souls 1 and 2, where you could very reliably make a build that focuses on miracles as offensive weapons. But I think that the difficulty in this gameplay loop is the developer's vision. A lot of people whine about how it's too hard, how it needed to have a easy mode, and it needed to have this and needed to have that. Look,
Well, because at that time it was the first game of its kind. It was hard from the beginning, and that jarred a lot of game reviewers, uh,
well, yeah,
explicitly.
I'll tell you one thing. People have been playing roguelike and very difficult games for years. A lot of these games have, a cult following, especially roguelike. So the developer's vision was essentially bringing a less punishing type of roguelike. One in which you lose something upon death, but not everything upon death. So you have to learn from your mistakes. Well, that guy killed me last time, he's not gonna get me that time. That trap killed me last time, he's not gonna get me this time. And that was the developer's vision. They wanted it to be hard but fair because every death, or almost every death, unless it was a glitch or something stupid, it's like, hey, this is on me. I can fix it for next time.
Yeah, they're
Now,
putting the onus on the player to weigh
exactly.
the risk of progression versus losing their experience or your souls at that point. What you everything you've gained up to that point.
I will tell you though, that game clearly needed some refining because of some of the jank in the combat and some of the problems with both the co-op and the invasions. But overall, this was a very good experience, which I'm going to give an 8 out of 10. I will also make the point that I am basing the overall rating on how the game has aged as well, not only the gameplay itself from when I first played it. So that's going to help some of the other games, but it's not going to help Demon Souls because they never made any DLC for it or any expansions, or they really didn't patch any of the jankiness out of the game.
All right, so this is probably gonna be the last time I'm gonna touch on Demon Souls here, but in the graphics section, you gave it a 7.5, and the remake a 10 out of 10, but you don't mention any of that for the rest of them. But does the gameplay or your overall change for the remake?
No, because the remake is a very faithful recreation of Demon Souls 1. Like, they recreated it to the point where it has all the jank in its combat.
They literally just updated the graphics. Excellent,
That is literally all they did. It's a graphical remake, but gameplay wise, it's complete fidelity.
excellent. All right, Dark Souls, your thoughts?
Oh, I would like to add the comment that Demon Souls is the OG Soulsborne. So it does stand on its 2 feet as a very good game. That even the original one, even though it no longer has net support, I still play it. It's great.
Awesome.
We can move up to Dark Souls, which is a major improvement on Demon Souls in essentially every way. One of the things that they improved upon, of course, was the graphics. The graphics on Dark Souls are much better. Character physics are better. The attacks, the weight of the weapons looks much better. The spells, the bosses, like it just looks much better in general. And I'm gonna give it an 8.5 out of 10.
Excellent. I like again. I assume what the did it come out on like a different console, or was it? You said if Demon Souls came out on PS3, Dark Souls stayed on the PS3, but it was later in the console cycle, correct?
Yes.
Excellent. So
Um,
it got to be uh, the advantage of coming out later and having the developers understand better how to create games on a console at that point.
Especially on PS3, which is notorious for how hard it was to create games for that console. Um, Dark Souls being on, later in the life cycle, and also another console probably helped a little bit with the development on the game, which looks very good and has stood the test of time to a certain extent. But this actually takes us to the sound of the game. And let me tell you one thing. If there's a game that has a lot of iconic battle themes, you talk about Dark Souls, especially the OG great battle theme of the Soul series, which is Ornstein and Smough. A lot of people pronounce it differently. Some people call him Ornstein. Some people call Smoke, but that I think the actual name is Ornstein and Smoke. But
Smog.
yeah, their battle theme their battle theme was iconic, and a lot of the boss themes are iconic. The ambience is much better represented in this game, and Firelink Shrine also has a pretty iconic theme in this game. They also updated some of the sounds. It's a little bit more subtle, but the sounds of magic being cast and miracles being cast, among some things like swords clashing, shield bashes, and all that stuff sounds great. And I'm gonna give this a 9 out of 10 regarding sound.
Excellent. I mean, it's if it ain't broke, don't fix it. It got a slightly better, and sounds like the OST from the Demon Souls to Dark Souls, especially over the same console series. But as for the story and the lore, they kind of go in a different direction with Dark Souls from Demons, don't they?
Yes, because Dark Souls has a much richer lore. Dark Souls has a lot of lore. A lot of it is hidden behind items, but Dark Souls took it a step further by explaining away a lot of the stuff that was in its lore that was inaccessible before by bringing out the DLC, which touched upon the kingdom of Ulasil and what actually happened to it, and giving an explanation about why, like the truth about Artorias and how he was corrupted by the abyss and why he had his ring was what allowed you to walk through the abyss to get to the Four Kings. But we're getting a lot into the actual gameplay. Just the lore is excellent. There's so much depth to what happened to the kingdom, to the chosen undead, all the stuff with the gods, the destruction of the everlasting dragons. You can spend hours figuring out what actually happened. And let me tell you, this is actually what the developers intended. Like they have a great story that you can just run through the game, or you can spend a bunch of hours just figuring out what actually happened. And they've created kind of a subculture because you have a whole section of YouTube with guys like Vadi Vidia and Last Protagonist just, breaking down the lore, bringing out their head canon, giving you stuff that's actually facts. And think about it. This is a game that's what, 10 years old, almost 10 years old, and people are still making videos about its lore to this day. So, what the developers instead intended was to create a subculture through the through the investigation of lore for their games. They absolutely nailed it.
Well, shoot, they pretty much left a lot of it open to interpretation. There's
Yeah,
very
and they
little details, and even like you mentioned the item descriptions a lot, the character dialogue, and any of the cutscenes that happen in game. It doesn't really paint you a massive picture of what's going on and what happened before and what's going to happen, and even the endings are it'll just fades to black in most cases. So there's a lot to interpretate, a lot to open to interpretation. I mean, and that's where you get a lot of these videos that come from. A lot of headcanon can come from this stuff.
and let me tell you, that's the beauty of it. Like Dark Souls, like the developers knew after the success of Demon Souls that they were going to make some sequels after Dark Souls. So what they did was they left a lot of the stuff open to be answered by other entries, not only creating the buzz among the fan base, but leaving some stuff open to be answered by later entries, and that's exactly what happened.
It
And
proved to be a pretty good gamble because the rest of the series could have fallen off the deep end completely, and no one would know what happened in Dark Souls One.
well, but it worked. What they
Yeah,
tried worked. And I'm gonna give it a 9 out of 10 because I love the lore of Dark Souls. Like objectively, it's a great story that you have to dedicate a lot of hours in your life to making sense of. That actually
I
tells
know a
me,
lot of games that have a, a little more simple lore story to them, but they'll have like books that will come out like graphic novels and stuff. But is there anything that Dark Souls has like that?
well, most of what I've seen is the developers actually talking about the lore, and a lot of the YouTubers just piecing things together.
I mean, there's that, but I'm talking about like I know Halo had like its own novel series leading up to Halo 3. I know Fallout has its own series, like books, like literal like paperback books that you could buy and you could read about that were based on the story, and a lot of times they were backed up by the, the developers themselves. So
I
does
should.
Dark Souls have something like that?
I don't think it does because the developers have mostly kept hush hush on the actual story of the game. And let me tell you something you mentioned
They
earlier.
wouldn't even bother licensing anything like that. I'm sure there's
It,
probably artists or not artists, but authors that would write something like that. They probably already have ideas.
well, what they did was instead of doing that, they got George R. Martin for Elden Ring, so you
Well,
can be sure.
is
Yeah,
that good? Is that going to be in the Dark Souls series? We already talked about that at one point, right?
yeah, but we'll probably have to wait until Elden Ring comes out to see how it fits into the Soulsborne universe because people have tried to shoehorn both the Bloodborne to some success and Sekiro with no success into the Soulsborne universe.
Sekiro's tough. I mean, this is way going off on a tangent, but I understand that Dark Souls, at least Dark Souls 3, has these Easterners clothes, the Easterner armor.
No,
Is
Dark
that
Souls 1 to 2.
that one to two? Okay, but could that because they so in Dark Souls 3 they allude to like an East, right? So could that be that could be Sekiro, right?
They people have come up with the theory. I personally don't see it, but you never know.
I mean, if it makes for an interesting read. Anyways,
We do use katanas in the Souls games.
oh
In
yeah,
all
a
of them.
lot of katanas. It can definitely be argued.
I was also going to mention this is like when you said that the protagonist you as the protagonist you're meant to play as the protagonist. You receive the least amount of information possible through the game, and this is something that happens in all the Souls games because the point is that the main character is always being manipulated by some force that is supposed to be greater than his own. In Dark Souls 1, it was the gods. In Dark Souls 2, it was the basically Nashandra, who is a descendant of the further pygmy, but let's not talk about that. Well, who is supposed to be the further pygmy who is Manus. In Dark Souls 3, it's well, the gods still the same gods, and in Bloodborne, it's whoever is because Bloodborne is very complex. Whoever is actually handling this world, which is supposed to be the Moon Presence. You did play Bloodborne. You remember that ending where you kill the Moon Presence and you become a great one. But in
Right.
another of the endings, Gurman just cuts your neck off and you wake up in the real world, indicating that this entire thing is actually a dream. So
Gee.
you're
So,
always given so little information as a protagonist. And if you want to find out what's actually happening in the world, you have to devote time to research, see what other people think, read all of the item descriptions. It takes a lot of time.
or if you want to find out, how the lore kind of works out, you can watch our next episode that we'll probably have, or one in the near future. Well, we'll probably cover a lot of this stuff from Dark Souls to Demon Souls to all the way up to Bloodborne, maybe even
Well,
Sekiro if we're feeling up to it. So,
I'm probably gonna go hard on Dark Souls first and do the rest of the non-connected universe later. So we do Dark Souls 1, 2, and 3. Then we touch upon Bloodborne, then Demon Souls, then Sekiro. That is, I think, a good logical order to take on regarding the lore of these games. We're also going to be touching up on some game mechanics that we like, game mechanics that we don't like, which is usually uh, an aspect of these games that people don't tend to look at without a lot of passion. Oh, I hate this. Oh, I love this. But rather an objective look at what we think the developers were intending with certain aspects of the gameplay loop for all of these games. That sound good?
and speaking of mechanics, which you alluded to the jankiness of the first game. So the Demon Souls had, and what he means by jankiness is there was the hitbox issues. Maybe there was some kind of overpowered move set for a certain weapon that was odd. And so, how did they do anything, or did they do anything to fix any of this in Dark Souls 1?
Well, Dark Souls 1 has much better hitbox, and they tried to actually make armors, let's say, operative by introducing the all loved or hated stat of poise,
Oh yeah,
which
we all know this.
ended up being broken and allowing it to break PvP, not PvE, but PvP. And actually, that can segue right into the game mechanics because remember when you said later, don't fix what ain't broken? Well, Dark Souls fixed something that wasn't broken by streamlining the combat system, making all of the stats do something meaningful, even luck if you want to be a farmer of items and increasing your item discovery. And they implemented a more immersive combat by improving the sound, as I had mentioned before. And also, they give you the illusion of choice because Dark Souls feels like it opens up into a truly open world, make your own choice game. Once you reach about the mid game and you're supposed to be hunting for the Lord Souls, even though we are still funneled into a specific progression. It has a specific story progression that you can't um get out of it. You can't get out of. But the boss quality in Dark Souls is much better than Demon Souls. I think this may be a controversial statement. Some people like some of the bosses in Demon Souls better than some of the bosses in Dark Souls, but some of the bosses in Dark Souls are just so good. I like using the word iconic. They are iconic. That you've seen so many memes, you've seen so much content revolving around them, and that was only improved with the release of the DLC. And Dark Souls began with a run of quality DLC that I think is unmatched by any other video game series in the history of gaming. Like
Saying a
every
lot.
DLC, yes,
I say that's saying a lot.
every DLC in the Soul series has been good, has ranged from very good to absolutely excellent. The DLC for Dark Souls 1 is amazing. It's great. It's excellent. It ties up some loose ends, explains a bunch of stuff, and gives you some great boss battles.
And yeah, you
Oh,
still only gave it a 9 out of 10 on here. So is there justify that? Why not
well,
the full 10 out of 10?
it's still a bit janky. We're mentioning jank again, especially in the PvP. The hitboxes, even though they're better than Demon Souls, are still kind of screwy, and it's kind of a glitchy game. Now
Mostly due to that poise mechanic you mentioned earlier.
oh my god, poise! Oh my god, poise! It's at least better implemented in 2 and 3, where poise and other stuff is broken.
Well, shit.
But
Even in Dark Souls 3, there's like almost no poise. Only on they put it to like the moves of the weapon, the certain
it's
attacks.
essentially. But and now I will tell you, Dark Souls is just an amazing game, and simplifying the way co-op worked because it was so easy to find co-op partners in Dark Souls. I sank hundreds of hours and even kept some of my characters behind on levels just so I could help other people in killing bosses and exploring areas. Just a lot of jolly cooperation, and so many likable characters like Solaire in this game. It's just absolutely amazing.
Yeah,
And that
he got big from this game too, didn't he? I mean,
oh yes, he did.
of all the memes that would come out of Dark Souls, he's the one that everyone understands where he comes from.
And I'll tell you one thing: for many people, this is the definitive Soulsborne experience. Dark Souls is the holy grail of Soulsborns, and I tend to agree. If it wasn't for the existence of one game that we're going to be touching on later, I actually give this game it's nearly perfect. If it wasn't for the glitchiness and some of the jank, it's a 9.5 out of 10. And on a personal note, again, I sank so many hours on this game into being a Sun Bro. I love being a Sun Bro. I love helping people in Jolly Cooperation. I love helping people kill invaders. That is such an, I think underrated aspect of this series of games. Playing with other people is amazing.
I think I'm gonna put a jolly cooperation counter on this video.
We should. And a jank counter too.
Jake counter, 'cause that's gonna come up at least several more times in this. So as when if Dark Souls is like the high watermark for them at this point, from Demon Souls to Dark Souls, does it continue to get better in Dark Souls 2, or is it kind of level off and plateau?
Well, Dark Souls 2 is an interesting topic First off, we're gonna rate it, and then we're gonna talk about that because the graphics are pretty similar to Dark Souls. I think Magic and Miracles look better, as do the models for some of the weapons and items. But the player character looks and moves weird, and his attacks also look weird with some weapons almost kind of robotic. But it's still to a certain extent an improvement on graphics from Dark Souls One. So I give it an 8 out of 10 on that. And regarding sound, the boss themes in general in this game are very good. It has a couple iconic themes as well, especially the one for Velstadt, the Royal Aegis. It's an amazing theme, as well as the old Dragon Slayer. Magic sounds great, but the sound of you hitting something or something hitting you is really weird. It's just so weird. I don't know why it's so weird, but it sounds weird and it sounds out of place with the rest of the series. And I think that actually kind of detracts from my experience, at least for me specifically, it detracts a lot from the experience. I
So
give it, I give,
when you say it sounds weird. It's just, it doesn't. You can't quantify that for anybody listening. So is it like it doesn't sound like you would think it should, or it
no,
sounds like close to but kind of off?
no, it just sounds off. Like you hitting something with a sword sounds like something blunt hitting something soft. That is how I best describe it.
Uh,
Not like a slash.
so it's not a good sound. Even if the sound didn't fit, it's not a satisfying sound. Like when you hit something, you know you got a hit, right? So you want it to sound good,
Yes,
sound satisfying.
it's not satisfying. Now blocking with a shield sounds way better. As well, that's most, and again, magic and miracles, as well as dark magic, sound pretty good. But just the sound of hitting and being hit with a melee weapon just sounds so weird. It sounds off. It sounds
Like
like if your weapon was wrapped in cotton, like a Q-tip.
a Q-tip. Very good. Maybe that'll be the next name of my character in Dark Souls 3, the Q-tip.
Please don't. Please don't.
Yes, excellent. Um, so then we move into the story part. We obviously could go way into depth with this, but in the for brevity, we can just kind of gloss over Dark Souls 2. So in Dark Souls 1, you gave it the 9 out of 10, very high score. You gave it a slightly lower score for this. Is there something you want to go into detail that would differentiate it from the last one?
Well, yeah. Look, Dark Souls 2 story deviates a lot from Dark Souls 1. Now, it's a very rich lore, also explained, and it has even more stuff that you can go in depth into. And let me tell you, the DLC greatly enhances um, this game in both a story and a gameplay perspective. But deviating so much from the first Dark Souls, even though it makes some vague connections to the first Dark Souls, kind of takes away from the experience just a little bit for me. But the story and the lore are still great. I give him an 8.5 out of 10.
Excellent. Excellent. And so, I mean, continuing on with the jank and the gameplay loop conversation from one to the next, does it get any better for Dark Souls 2?
Look, the problem with Dark Souls 2, and this is what Dark Souls 2 had two specific things that really pissed a lot of people off. And it's the implementation of some of the new gameplay mechanics and the layout of the map. Now, the layout of the map doesn't bother me that much. It's a game. They did the best they could with what they had. People wanted a more comprehensive map. I understand. I respect the opinions of people who didn't really like it, but I will tell you, some of the implementations Dark Souls do 2 applied in regards to the gameplay loop were very good. Like dark magic being its own thing, more healing options, which kind of make the game a bit is easy until you play the definitive version, and new weapon types and weapon new a lot of new weapons. The problem is that first off, a lot of people really wanted dual wielding to be its own thing in this game, but it just required so much level investment that it wasn't really viable. They also created a stat called ADP or adaptability, and that had to do with how fast you would drink your Estes, and it also had to do with how many iframes you got from rolling. I thought that was a terrible mistake. Now, even with those things, a lot of people whine hard about this game, but this is a very good game. If this game hadn't been made by FromSoft, they would have, like a lot of people would say, this is the greatest non FromSoft Souls like ever made, because it's a very good game. It's got very interesting lore. It's got some varied environments. The main problem with it, besides the stuff I've mentioned before, like the player character looking weird, the attack animations and the sound of the attacks looking kind of weird, and the mess with the map. Um, the main problem I think with the game is that it has too many easy and gimmicky boss battles. I think that it has a lot of mob boss battles. A mob boss battle is a boss battle where there's not one big bad, but a bunch of weaker enemies. They also had boss battles which were gimmicky, like the Royal Rat Authority, where you had to kill a bunch of mobs so that the main guy would appear. This was better implemented later in Bloodborne, and this part is just too easy and it's kind of weird. And it was, compared to the last game, it was kind of easy. I attribute some of that to most of the players that got Dark Souls 2 had already played Dark Souls 1, but the amount of healing options also made the game quite easier. Now, that being said, the definitive version of this game, which is the Scholar of um, the First Sin version of this game, fixes a lot of this stuff by ramping up the difficulty, giving you more red phantoms and tougher enemies, and just making the game with all the extra content a lot more interesting.
So
Now,
a quick thought on the difficulty of the game. So there's at this point they're on their second iteration, right? So they've gone through their first one, and their Demon Souls was also a thing. So at this point, this game's on PlayStation 4, correct?
oh, it's PS3.
Oh, it's still PS3. So it's already had another title on this. So it's had enough time to have a hardcore audience, and now it's been on here enough times where it's gonna have a lot of new players. So at this point, they're kind of a victim of their own success, and they're famous for having a hard game that's difficult, right? So the people who want it hard, they want it even harder, and the people that are just getting into it, they you want them to stick around, keep playing the game, probably play the next one. So that's
Yeah,
kind of the thing, the line they have to draw. So I figure that's probably why they have some bosses that are a little easier, a little more of a walkthrough, and some that are probably a little more again balls to the wall, right? Would you agree?
no, and they also have the problem that Dark Souls had the tagline of being hard but fair, but Dark Souls 2 sometimes just had some BS. There were some places where there were just some, it was BS, either because it was so easy or some very annoying difficulty spikes, which, to be fair, have also appeared in some of the other games, but not to this point. Like, um, Dark Souls 2 have a couple areas that are absolutely insufferable, and not because they are meant to be because of gameplay mechanics, but just feel cheap. I don't know if you know what I mean, because for example, we played some swamp levels together, and you know that swamp levels are designed to be annoying like that, but it's a game mechanic that you can counteract by bringing the right items and the right loadout. But Dark Souls 2 has some areas, especially the infamous Prime Shrine of a Mana, that just feel cheap. So that's something else that pissed a lot of people off.
Is
But
that am I thinking of the one where there's all these giant rolling balls flying around?
no, that's in Dark Souls 2. A bunch of people shooting magic at you.
Ah, okay.
So yeah, and Scholar of the First Sin did a lot to even out the difficulty so that it's hard. The game is technically hard throughout. It also suffered from the problem where a lot of like the meta. was very well defined, and a lot of the stuff just wasn't viable because the meta was so powerful. Like using um the rapier for PvE and using Sentier Spear for PvP. It was just like the meta was too defined and not evolving. Like the meta evolved significantly throughout the lifespan of, well, not lifespan because it's still alive. There's a lot of PvP going on in Dark Souls 3, but the meta has evolved significantly both in Dark Souls 3, Bloodborne, and hell, even Dark Souls 1. But the meta was clearly defined from the beginning and really didn't change. But still, this is a great game. This is a very, very good game. And if you haven't played it, it's worth your time. You should play it. The graphics look a little outdated, but this is a very good game. And it pisses a lot of people off that usually you have to look up a guide to know what to do in some of these games. But this is, again, what the developers intended. So I don't really see it as a negative. Usually for me, it's a negative if it's something that A, the developers didn't intend, and B, it doesn't make sense. If there is consistency throughout the execution of a game and the vision that the developers have for a game, I can't see it as a negative. That is an issue with, for example, the lore and being lost and not knowing what to do,
Right. Well,
having to
it's
explore.
one thing to try and to have that intention, but it's a whole nother thing to convey that to the player, right? You can't play a game of chess if you don't know how the fucking overall pieces move. You're just making it up, right?
But the point is that you get this sense of the need for exploration and vagueness from the moment you take the controller. It's not like the game spends half the game holding your hand and then tells you, "Well, I moved the goalpost. You're on your own." No, you always have to talk to everyone that's available. You always have to explore. You always have to look for every nook and every cranny. So there is internal consistency in the entirety of the games. Can we agree on that?
Fair enough.
So again, it's a very worthwhile playthrough. I give it an 8 out of 10 in gameplay, and overall, I think it's its own thing. I think that if you see it as its own thing instead of a direct continuation to Dark Souls, it's in a whole new kingdom, and there's no direct continuity. You're gonna have a bad time, but if you see it as its own thing, its own Dark Souls identity, you're gonna have a good time, and I give it an 8.5 out of 10. I do also have to comment that Dark Souls DLC in general is a thing of beauty. All they did with the DLC in all these games is improve the overall game, and this game is no exception. I think that overall, this is the game that was most helped by the release of the Scholar of the First Senate edition. It's just a night and day in terms of quality for both games.
Fair enough. So you alluded to the fact that this really starts up the whole DLC being the tire of loose ends for a lot of these games, but then they kind of go off the beaten path after Dark Souls 2 with their next iteration, which is kind of a completely different lane that they jump into. You want to go over
Oh yeah.
their Bloodborne a little bit?
Oh yes, I do. Bloodborne is one of, if not my favorite game of all time. Um, Graphically, Bloodborne really, really, really benefited from being on the past console generation. It looks amazing on PS4. The Lovecraftian stuff isn't for everyone, but from the moment I first played it from today, I still think it looks amazing, and I give it a 10 out of 10 in visuals. Not only because of the graphical quality, which is
Gotta
a
be the
thing on
art
its own.
direction at this point,
The
then.
art direction, what they were going for, is conveyed perfectly in every enemy, in every spell, in every boss. It's just like it's absolutely stunning and it's perfect. Um, Bloodborne, I think, is the game that benefited the most from keeping the OST behind what I like to call the boss wall, because of all the games, the one that has more crap your pants moments from the sound and more need to pay close attention to sound is Bloodborne. Again,
And
a lot of these,
that pays a lot of homage to the environment that they're in, right? So you mentioned the
yes, they do.
Lovecraftian vibe to it. there's a lot more of like this eeriness that they can bring into it as opposed to Dark Souls, which was a lot more classical, flute based, um, like big drums and just bass. But now it's Bloodborne. It's
More of a
it's like
choir.
Lovecraftian, like Victorian era kind of
Yes.
soundtracks.
And this also has some very memorable boss themes. Cleric Beast, which is reused for some other Beast boss battles, and mostly used for members of the church, and just gives you a sense of the desperation that these this members of the church that converted into grotesque beasts have to, continue their way of life. And of course, the theme of Gurman, the de facto final boss of the game that can actually not be the final boss, but that's a topic for another video, is absolutely amazing. I give the soundtrack a 9 out of 10.
It's well deserved.
And regarding the story, I do have most of my criticism of Bloodborne goes to the story because it has an amazing, very complex story, but it's also very confusing. I think this game could have used some more in-game dialogue regarding the story, like, for example, Dark Souls 3 did, but they went very minimalist. And unless you invest a lot of hours doing research on the story of Bloodborne, excuse me, on the story of Bloodborne, it's not gonna make any goddamn sense.
That's for sure. So yeah, it's all extremely cryptic, just like all these Dark Souls games, but it's got and it goes to an extra level of insanity.
Yeah, because look, the point is, in all of these games, you're supposed to have as little information as possible. When you sit and analyze it, you're a guy who's being manipulated by, forces outside of your scope to do something. They want you to do something, and they use direct forces, the forces under their control to help you do something. But they don't want you to know why you're doing what you're doing. You're just doing what you're told to do. Now, Bloodborne is the pinnacle of this. You're a hunter, and you are told many times during the game that a hunter must hunt. But why? And what are the beasts? And why are the beasts? And this is an extremely complex story. It's beautiful if you devote your time to looking into it. As beautiful as something Lovecraftian can be, but it's an absolutely amazing story. I give it a 9 out of 10.
It's interesting that they the any DLC for this, which I don't recall any really, they didn't release anything to help mop up some of the details of this.
Oh, no, no, they did. The promise. When we played it, remember where you got your beast cutter, that you love that weapon?
Oh yeah, that thing rocked.
That is the DLC.
That was a
That is
DLC,
called
and I
the old
remember now.
yeah, that is the DLC. The old hunters.
The old hunters, that was it. Yeah. So I mean, they just keep coming out with the DLC. They you can't fault them for supporting their games afterwards. But there's actually been some talk, even when Bloodborne released, that they were going to do a Dark Souls or Bloodborne 2. But it seems like they're now that they're turning to Elden Ring. You think Bloodborne 2 could still be on the table later on?
Oh God, I
I mean, they
wish.
have a lot of room in the story to add another one, but at this point, isn't Miyazaki gonna kind of move on to something else?
Well, you never know because they're doing Elden Ring now, and there have been whispers about a project regarding Bloodborne 2, but they need to complete the PC port first. I'm keeping out hope because I really want a Bloodborne 2. They may still have a sour taste in their mouth because of what Dark Souls 2 entailed, and Miyazaki may want to be really hands on if they're going to make a Bloodborne 2, even though this is essentially a can't miss proposition, in my opinion. But
Easily.
again, a lot of the lore in this game is hidden not only behind items, but behind the exploration of both the Chalice dungeons, which we'll talk about in a bit, and the DLC, which is absolutely amazing, but makes the game more confusing instead of tying any loose ends.
Yeah. Well. Yeah, they had a good run with the DLC at least.
No, again, it's amazing DLC, more bosses. It clears up some stuff, but it lore wise, it just makes it more convoluted. And talking about this DLC, this brings us to the gameplay. Everybody that's seen Dark Souls knows what Dark Souls is. knows that Dark Souls is about being methodical. It's about hiding behind your shield or your defensive option of choice, be it a roll or shield. It's about finding the right angle, the right time to attack, and Bloodborne says, screw all that and go balls to the wall. That is what Bloodborne does.
Yeah,
Bloodborne
I
absolutely.
gotta admit the whole shooting someone to parry them was a bit confusing at first. Physically,
Yes.
I still don't understand how that works.
So what Bloodborne did was it completely changed up the formula and sat down and said, we want an aggressive play style, and we want it now. No more shields. You have guns as your main ranged option, but they barely do any damage. We want you to be that most of these enemies have very oppressive long range attacks, so you have to be right up in their face so you can dodge what they're doing. And they brought one of the coolest concepts I have ever seen in the video game with the trick weapons. Because every weapon is essentially, or most of the weapons are essentially two weapons instead of one.
Right, it changes the handling of them pretty significantly.
Yeah, for example, let's take my favorite weapon in Bloodborne, which is the Whirligig Saw. If you use it without the saw, it's like a big club that does blunt damage. But if you add the saw to it and it becomes a Whirligig Saw, it's an entirely like another thing. It's just like most of these weapons, for example, the threaded cane, that's either a cane that does blunt damage or a whip that does slash damage.
It's really good range for how big it was and how fast it
Yeah,
was.
and also the beast cut, not the beast cutter. Um, what's the name of? Well, yeah, the beast cutter is a good example, which is
That
either
was
a
a
sword.
DLC weapon, which was in the same vein as the cane whip, the whip cane. Um, it's
Yeah,
basically a large club that turned into this floppy little whip thing, but still had the club at the end.
so you have all of these weapons that are essentially two weapons. Some of them have the hidden attribute of being serrated or holy, doing either more damage to beasts or to I don't even I can't recall right now what the holy I think it was the celestial beings it did more damage to, but there's just so much to dig into when you talk about the weapons in the game and the gameplay, because again, they had the problem that in the past games, magic was just too overpowered. So they solved that make by hiding magic, like they severely nerfed magic and made it an end game thing. So in this game, you have to rely on your physical attacks. Now you have some ranged options like Simon's Blowblade, and you have the cannon, which I love, and for a strength build, of course. And you have the option to parry a lot of the enemies, but in general, you have to be in the face of the enemies. I've heard a common complaint about the economy of the game and things getting more expensive as the game goes by. I don't think that's valid. I think it makes sense from a limiting because what the game wants to do is to limit your resources. People whine a lot about the economy of blood vials, blood bullets, and other consumables, but the whole point of it is making your mistakes more like punish you harder. Because if you spend 20 blood vials in a boss battle and died, now you have to farm those 20 blood vials back. No freebies. Nothing is free in Bloodborne. Well, death is free. Nothing else is free.
Yeah, sorry about that. One of our buddies jumped in here. Probably thought we were playing Rust. Yeah, well, a lot of people were also whining about the fact that the ammunition that these weapons were shooting, where you had to pay. Well, not only pay for it, but they would take from your health or something like that.
Oh yeah, you're talking about
The
blood
blood
bullets, which
bullets, yeah.
you use them in order to, lengthen your ability to use all your quicksilver bullets by paying some blood, some of your health, in order to be able to use some essentially, let's call it virtual bullets. And people whine about that. It should cost health. Why is this system so oppressive? But it makes sense. Again, I am consistent throughout the games when I say this is the developer's vision. They wanted to constrict the amount of resources you have so that your choices carry more weight. I think that is a game mechanic in itself, and it is not a bad game mechanic. What they're telling you is, I hate the get good culture, but that's what they're telling you. That hey, you don't want to waste blood vials, you don't want to farm for blood vials, then don't die so much. Play better.
Get
Listen to your
good,
environment.
noob.
Yeah, get good. And as I was saying, again, the game is also structured around this new hyper aggressive gameplay they want you to take, because the bosses are either smaller bosses that are as fast as you are, like Father Gascoigne or Gurman, or the Shadows of Yarnum, or you have some big but very fast bosses with very oppressive attack patterns. So you like Bloodstarved Beast or the One Reborn. So you have to be on their face and you have to attack. You have to take care of the rally mechanic, which is also a way for the developers to direct you into being aggressive. If you take a hit, you can regain some health by dealing damage to the enemy.
Yeah,
In
but
general,
I'd also argue that a lot of these Souls games, they if you played it in an aggressive way from the beginning, it was punishing. But if once you got the hang of the windows that you needed to get into and when not to be greedy, then the Bloodborne gameplay wasn't such a high step for you to make.
yeah, most people, but the problem is that, remember this, a lot of people played Demon Souls, Dark Souls, and Dark Souls 2 with a very good on hand defensive option in the form of a shield. Shields are no longer a viable thing in Bloodborne,
I don't know
and
about
that is
you,
a
but
big
I
adjustment.
really don't tool around with the shield all that much. I let the my roll talk for themselves.
Yeah, and your dodge has a lot of iframes in Bloodborne. Doesn't consume that much stamina. Again, all geared toward the balls to the wall, be more aggressive type of gameplay that they wanted you to employ, and the new stat in blood tinge that you used for your some of the weapons and for your bullets. In general, I think that the gameplay loop for Bloodborne is as close as you can get to perfect if you're into these kinds of games. The design of the enemies, of the bosses, the exploration, it's all spot on. Um, I think that their vision was just so realized in the gameplay of this game. The only thing that brings it down even a little bit is the problem with the lack of cooperation because of the bad net code. But even then, and it's for
You
this
mean
that
the jolly cooperation?
there's no jolly coop. There's not a lot of jolly
Oh,
cooperation
no jolly
in Bloodborne.
cooperation.
Yeah, because they screwed up the net code. That is probably a thing that had a lot to do with the release of a new console, so I can't really blame them for it. But it does bring the score down just a little bit, as well as the fact that they limited your ranged options so much. Like some builds just don't have viable ranged options. I'm gonna give it a 9.5 out of 10.
Fair enough.
However, overall, my opinion, Bloodborne is the definitive gaming experience of the 2010s. Feel free to disagree with me. I think Bloodborne is the best game of the 2010s. It's a game that's being heavily played, heavily, it creates a lot of content in terms of lore, in terms of gameplay. It had so much content. Like the Chalice dungeons, although they get repetitive, are a game on their own. You can easily sink so many hours into this. Some people think it's grindy. It's grindy if you want it to be, um, if you really want to get into the meta of the PvP. But that's just some of the hardcore guys that aren't gonna really complain about, farming hard for these gems. But there's just so much content. All of it is enjoyable. I think the economy is spot on. I don't think it's as grindy as people say if you know what you're doing. I think this game is the definitive Soulsborne experience, and I give it a 10 out of 10 as my favorite Soulsborne game, one of my favorites, if not the favorite at all time. I think some of the criticism is unfounded. I think the netcode criticism is well founded, and I think the massive nerf on magic is not an unfounded criticism. But otherwise, this game is perfect.
It was definitely up there for one of the better games for that I've ever played as well. Um, so then what leads us to our last iteration here. I mean, we've been going on here for quite a while, but we wanted to kind of gloss over, and we're going to go into far more depth with the lore here with each of these games. Dark Souls 3 being the most recent one released on the new generation of consoles as well. Um, you want to get into what you think of this? Obviously, the graphics here, obviously a little better. What do you think?
Oh no, Dark Souls 3 greatly benefited from being released in the PS4. This game has great graphical fidelity. The environments look great. Player character looks great. They did a great job with some of the environments. Archdragon Peak is such a beautiful area. In general, it's beautiful. The lighting, the old destroyed structures. The character looks so good. The enemies, the magic effects, the boss design, it's just amazing. The armor variety, they did a lot. Like there are, you can see high fidelity versions of armor sets from both Dark Souls 1 and Dark Souls 2, as well as some of the weapons, like the Fume Ultra Great Sword. It's just amazing, and I give it an absolutely clear 10 out of 10.
Absolutely looks amazing, especially compared to all the other ones. Even Bloodborne, you gave them both 10 out of 10, so they obviously carried all the way over. So then that naturally leads us into the sound design. A little bit of a step down here. Can you explain why?
Yeah, I think that even though things like the sword clashes, magic, pyromancy all sound absolutely amazing, as well as the environments, I think that Dark Souls 3 likes the musical oomph that some of the prior games had. I don't think some people may not agree with me, but I don't think that a lot of these themes they're not as iconic as some of the prior themes. Like I was playing Dark Souls 3 a little bit yesterday, and I can't tell you off of the back of my head, well, this theme is just amazing. Maybe the theme of the Lord of Cinder is pretty nice, but it also has that really annoying hammer sound in Firelink Shrine that I don't know who chose that. That's terrible. And I think I'm gonna give it an 8 out of 10, even though I like it overall. I think it could have been better.
Yeah, well, maybe there because it was the later part of the PlayStation 4 it dropped on, so you would expect it to get a little better, but I guess they dropped the ball a tiny bit here. Um, but then they start off with a different universe that they start telling the story in? Because I know it changes up some stuff here timeline wise, right?
Yeah, I will tell you, Dark Souls 3, I think, is the pinnacle of lore and storytelling in Dark Souls because it has the perfect combination of you receiving some information, even even though it's kind of cryptic from a lot of the NPCs and a lot of the items, but they pay great homage to the prior two games with both environments and some of the items. Some people don't like the service to the prior games. I'm a sucker for that stuff,
Well,
especially someone that
when you're on your third iteration for this game, you kind of got to look back at the where you started, at least
yeah.
to give a little nod to your player base there.
So what do? They essentially tell you what happened after Dark Souls 1. They tie some loose ends with Dark Souls 2. They bring back items and weapons from both games that tell you some of the stuff that's happened afterwards. And they continue the tradition. They had two amazing DLC that absolutely wrap up some of the loose ends, like explaining what happened, why there's a new painted world, why is there a new painted world, why there was a painted world before, and the Ring City, which explained a bunch of stuff with the pygmies and has what is considered the
The
canon,
friggin' pygmies.
yeah, the canon final boss for the entire game in Slave Night Gale, and they explain so much stuff. They also make a callback all the way to Dark Souls 1 about a throwaway line that Solaire gives you when he tells you that time is convoluted, and it essentially all boils down to what the Ring City actually is. So they give you satisfying endings. and they create a bunch of canon regarding the Age of Man. It's just, I think, um, just giving they give you, they spoon feed you all of that, but it's still so cryptic. You know that there's a convoluted timeline. You don't know what's what, who's who, and when's when. So it's beautiful. It's also something that people have been looking at making content on to this day. So in terms of lore, I am definitely going to give it a 10 out of 10.
It's definitely something that you can really sink your teeth into and get deep on, especially when you start bringing in. I feel like with any series, any fictional series, when you start getting into different timelines and stuff, you open up a lot of different avenues you can go storytelling wise. So
And it
um,
does.
it definitely does. It owns every piece of that territory. So, but as far as the gameplay is concerned, there was a little bit of a. They like to play around with a lot of the not the PvP aspect, but the mechanics. Poise we mentioned before with Dark Souls 2. Um, the magic and the power therein. Is there any real change in that regard?
Well, first off, let's go on to the negatives. First off, they screwed up poise again, and the poise values are weird. They work weird. They're hard to understand. They also screwed up the equipment degradation. There's no more, like, equipment degrades so slow in Dark Souls 3 that it's not even worth mentioning. Even though that was the drawback of some of the katanas, they screwed up the degradation on both weapons, on armor.
Yeah, I
Um,
forgot that was a thing until I saw it in one of those when you're talking to Andre. It's in his menus of things you could fix your weapons. Like I've never needed to fix anything.
no, you never have. And there's even an item to repair your weapon, and you never use it. Why
Nope,
would you need repair powder?
because
Nothing breaks.
when you rest at a bonfire, it fixes your weapon.
It also has the same problem with jank hit detection, that it's hard, that when in PvP, that it's had since Dark Souls 1, and it's really annoying and forces
It's a
you,
feature at this
like,
point.
it makes some faster weapons essentially not viable because it's so hard to hit people with them.
But you couple that with
And
the net code, then you're kind of asking for issues.
yeah, and the other thing is that it has some very easy or gimmicky bosses. I don't like gimmick bosses. I think the fact that they gave you alternative ways to kill both Yorm and the Drake in Archdragon Peak, they're cool, but they're very annoying. I don't like gimmick bosses.
Well, if
Whatever.
I guess if you didn't know that the Stormbringer was back there and you
The
killed
Stormbreaker
Yorm
was cool.
all without it, you're like, oh, you're feeling pretty good about yourself at that point. But I mean, when you're talking about gimmick bosses, Deacons of the Deep,
Oh yeah,
ridiculous.
well, it's a mob boss, but it's also really it's a gimmick. It's
But yeah, but
basically.
you figure out what's going on like the first like 5 seconds.
Yeah, so and it's also Deacon Teeth is also a very easy boss battle. It's easy overall. There are some very easy bosses, and the Sage is also very easy. His clone
That
gimmick,
stupid
whatever.
tree
Yeah,
that
the tree
sits
is
on
also
you,
a gimmick, and it's very easy. So
Wolnir.
again, those are the negatives, but the positives, they've updated the combat system to the point where it's like a mix between Dark Souls 1 and Bloodborne because it's faster, it has some visceral attacks, and it has some better, like, the stamina is a bit more, let's say, generous. So you have more mobility if you want to, of course, because you can be a slowpoke, but it has more mobility. The introduction of weapon arts also gives some variety and makes some weapons that are otherwise not as viable both in terms of PvE and PvP. And that's another thing that I want to get to, even though the PvP aspect, because of the jankiness, pisses some people off and a very specific meta. Jolly Cooperation is the best out of all the Soulsborne games in this game.
I want
Um,
to point out something with that's very that's it's exclusive to the Souls games. They do co-op differently than a lot of games. I don't know if anybody who's played it, they obviously know what I'm talking about. But it's almost like you have to co-op with items that are within the lore or within the game. So you have like a stone that you put a sign down on the ground, and someone in a different universe will summon you through the ether from that sign that you put down. So it's not like you go into a separate menu in like the main menu of the game and you sign up for co-op. It's all within the game. So that I just thought that was interesting when I started playing the game. I started off on Dark Souls 3. So I didn't understand any of the jolly cooperation from the last couple ones that he's been talking about.
So yeah, and they also made some quality of life improvements, like being able to respect your character, which was also a thing in Dark Souls 2, but it just felt weird, for some reason.
Weird in what
And
way? Did it like cost you souls or something, like a percentage?
no, it just like it again. It may be a me thing, but it just felt weird. Respecting just felt weird because in this game, like you can seamlessly go if you're high enough level, like go and make a strength weapon level 10 or a quality weapon level 10 and just respect your character to have if he was only dex to have 40 strength and 40 dex and use your quality weapon, but it felt weird in Dark Souls 2. I don't know how to explain it, but it really did. And in that sense, I'll tell you one thing. One all things considered, like Dark Souls 3 has a very enjoyable gameplay loop. So much exploration, so much content. Co-op is amazing. PvP could be better, but it's still enjoyable. Both the invasions and they have a PvP arena like they do in Dark Souls 2.
Yeah,
The
with the update, you don't actually have to go to the predetermined like PvP area. Like I know there's like some arenas around up after Pond of Sullivan. There's that popular spot, but you can do it straight from the bonfire menu now, which is excellent.
yes,
I
to
haven't
get
done
an
it yet.
item. Yeah, I'll tell you, the two DLC are both amazing. Even though the Ring City is clearly the superior DLC, both in in quality and length of the DLC, and also quality and difficulty of the bosses. They have the probably the for me the toughest boss fight in the entire series in Midir. Maybe because he counters. I love pyromancers. I've been making pyromancers since Dark Souls 1, and he counters pyromancy hard. I'm bringing in my strength guy now to fight him. My luck guy would probably wreck him, but whatever. He is a very tough boss fight. There are so many builds. There are so many questline conclusions, so many different endings. You could know. Like I have sunk hundreds of hours in this game, and every so often I still get the Dark Souls 3 itch, and I just wanna either go and try out a new build or a new weapon or just enjoy some jolly cooperation.
You've pretty much done all of them, have you? Haven't you? All the major builds.
I have, but there's always some new stuff you can do. There's always some new stuff you can do. But in summary, I think this is another masterpiece that's from Software made, and I give it a 9 out of 10.
9 out of 10. Like, he never gave any of these under an 8, I believe. I'm looking all the way
I
down at
did
the
not.
bottom here. Nope, you didn't.
It's a
You speak very highly of this series.
yes. I mean 9 out of 10 in gameplay, but overall, I think it's a great game, really enriched by the DLC. And I think it's the definitive co-op experience in the series. And overall, I also give it a 9 out of 10, and I still co-op hard in this game. You may be able to. I may be doing some jolly cooperation with you one of these days, or you may invade me because I still play this game a lot.
Well, imagine if you see Tongue Butthole trouncing around with some guy named Jotun.
Oh my god!
You know who you're fighting.
So I am because my overall ranking also talks like has to do with how well the game has held up over time. My ranking is as follows, and I don't know if this is controversial, but it's the way I see it. I think I would go Demon Souls, Dark Souls 2, Dark Souls, Dark Souls 3, Bloodborne, from worst to best.
Yep. I'm not certain. I can't. I'd like to speak for the other two, and probably someday I'll play them. I don't have a. Are they once they get remastered for PS4 or something? I'll probably pull them up.
Both of them are.
Just so I know what I'm talking about. They're already on PS4.
Yeah,
They
you
have
can
like
get.
the
We actually have Scholar of the First Sin. We don't have Dark Souls Remastered, but we have Dark Souls 2 Scholar of the First Sin.
shoot.
You can play it.
Well, shoot. We might have to pull up a stream right before Elden Ring drops. What do you think?
Oh, we should do a Soulsathon a couple
Souls
weekends
on.
before Elden
There you
Ring
go.
drops.
I can get down with that. Um, no, with their last iteration, well, their next iteration. I don't know if it's the last. Probably not. This game makes a lot of money, but Elden Ring's coming out end of February. Do
End of
we know?
February.
Yeah, what do we know about the story so far with Elden Ring? It's obviously a brand new thing, but what do we have just from what we've seen with the YouTubers that are playing it?
Well, as you know, this is going to be a very George R. Martin type of story. What I've seen so far is that it's very similar to the Dark Souls structure of games where you are a chosen one for something. But I will tell you, I've avoided watching a lot of gameplay on this game because I want to experience, like I always do this with the Soul games. I want to experience it like in its full. But I have a
Ah,
general idea of what the fantasy setting might be.
because it
We're
still
probably,
seems like it's got the Dark Souls 3, like
yeah,
the knights, the dragons, that whole thing. Obviously, you've seen dragons. I've seen they have you get to ride a horse now. That's fun. It's
that's
got a
going to
double
be
jump.
amazing.
Yeah,
That's going
and
to be amazing.
I feel like there's going to be a lot of cheesability for the bosses if you can double jump to these different areas.
They'll find some way to forbid you from using the horse for a lot of these battles for sure.
Well, a lot I've seen at least some of these battles happen outside. It's like extremely open world. So we'll see how this works then. Yeah, I've only watched a little bit of a video. I haven't really sunk anything into the watching a YouTuber play through it multiple times and try to explain it to you. But yeah, I'm stoked. I'm ready to go.
Okay, and I think that's all the time we have for today. It's been very enjoyable hour of talking about my favorite game series of all time.
And we tried to keep it brief too. We
We
I
did.
think we ran through this one, not this particular, but our first dry run. We had to shut it down because we were gonna go on for hours. Um, so we can go ahead and wrap it up. Say goodbye to our friends if we
Yeah.
have any still watching.
Hopefully we can get some friends interested in our content, and that'll be all for today.
That'll be all for today. See you guys.
Stay locked on Lordran.